While the ocean's vastness offers a sense of peace and tremendous relief, it also conceals hidden dangers beneath its surface. One family, eager to enjoy the ocean's serenity, overlooked these lurking threats and tragically paid the ultimate price. Join us as we recount the harrowing events of their fateful day. The sun hung high over the South African coastline, casting its bright golden light across the serene waters. A small family of 5, parents Philip and Alyssa and their 3 children, Caleb, Sarah, and little Vom, had embarked on a long-awaited boating trip, eager for a day filled with laughter, sun, and the beauty of the open sea. The boat, a modest but sturdy vessel, bobbed gently as they left the shore behind, the excitement palpable. The crisp, salty air filled their lungs, the sound of the waves lapping against the hull mixing with their cheerful voices. The coast of South Africa has always been known for its rugged beauty and abundant wildlife, and today the waters are as calm as they could have hoped. Philip steered the boat with a practiced hand, guiding them out to a quiet, secluded bay he'd heard about from locals. The bay was framed by towering cliffs on one side and an endless ocean on the other, a hidden gem perfect for a family looking for peace and privacy. Alyssa stood beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder as she admired the crystal-clear water below. It seemed like the perfect place to anchor, far enough from the busier areas to feel like an adventure, but close enough to the shoreline to feel safe. As they lowered the anchor, the children gathered eagerly at the edge of the boat, leaning over to peer into the clear blue water. Fish darted just beneath the surface, and the gentle rocking of the ship only added to the tranquil atmosphere. Caleb and Sarah, the 2 oldest, begged their parents to let them swim, their eyes wide with anticipation. Even little Vom, who was usually nervous about the ocean, had caught their enthusiasm, his tiny hands gripping the boat's rail as he looked out at the inviting sea. Philip, always the protective father, glanced around the bay, scanning the calm waters for any signs of danger. The ocean appeared utterly still, with nothing more than the occasional ripple disturbing its surface. Satisfied that it was safe, he nodded to Alyssa, and she gave a warm, reassuring smile as they began helping the children into their swimsuits. The day had unfolded exactly as they'd imagined, perfectly peaceful, a moment of family togetherness they'd remember for years. However, lurking far below the surface, something watched. A massive great white shark, a creature of terrifying power and ancient instinct, had been drawn to the bay by the movement of the boat. Its great body glided silently through the depths, unseen and unnoticed by the family above. The shark, over 16 feet long, was a master of its environment, an apex predator finely attuned to the vibrations in the water. It circled slowly, its dark shape blending seamlessly into the blue-green expanse of the ocean. For now, it was patient, waiting, stalking. As Caleb and Sarah splashed into the water, their laughter filled the air, echoing off the surrounding cliffs. Vom, with his water wings strapped securely to his arms, dipped his toes into the cool water from the side of the boat, giggling as Alyssa lowered him in. Philip, ever watchful, stood by with a smile, his eyes following their movements. But the beauty of the scene was deceiving. Below, the shark's predatory focus had locked onto the splashing of the children, mistaking it for the furious thrashing of injured prey. Its large black eyes rolled in its head as it began to rise, slowly closing the distance between itself and the surface. Minutes passed without incident, the children blissfully unaware of the danger creeping closer. Alyssa had joined them in the water, keeping a watchful eye as the children swam near the boat. Philip, proud of his family's happiness, waded in beside her, the warm sun on their backs and the cool water a perfect contrast. Everything felt perfect, almost too perfect. Suddenly beneath them, the shark surged forward. Its robust body propelled it upwards with terrifying speed. Philip, sensing a strange shift in the water, froze for a brief moment. But before he could react, an enormous force struck him from below. The water around him exploded into a violent spray as the great white's jaws clamped down on his torso with horrifying precision. The initial shock paralyzed him, his body disappearing beneath the surface in a flash of red. Alyssa turned at the sound of the splash, but what she saw didn't register at first. Her husband was gone, and in his place the water churned violently, dark red tendrils spreading outward like ink in water. Her heart lurched in her chest as realization struck. Philip had been attacked. In an instant, terror gripped her as she screamed for the children to get back to the boat. Caleb, Sarah, and Vom, confused and terrified, scrambled toward the ladder, but panic made them slow, their small limbs struggling to move through the water. Alyssa, adrenaline coursing through her, pushed them toward the boat, her heart pounding as she caught a glimpse of the massive shape moving beneath the surface. But the shark was not finished. It had tasted blood, and the frenzy that followed was inevitable. With terrifying swiftness, it came back for more. Its tail flicked powerfully as it made a sharp turn, rising once again from the deep. Alyssa, now fully aware of the danger, tried desperately to lift Vom out of the water, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the ladder. She felt something brush against her leg and knew immediately what it was. The shark was beneath her. She barely had time to react before the beast struck again. This time it grabbed her leg, pulling her under with terrifying force. She thrashed wildly, trying to free herself, but the shark's jaws were too strong. The pain was excruciating. Her leg caught in the razor-sharp teeth as the shark twisted violently, dragging her deeper. She caught a final, desperate glimpse of her children's terrified faces before the darkness swallowed her. Caleb and Sarah, sobbing uncontrollably, managed to pull themselves onto the boat, their bodies trembling with fear and shock. Vom, too small to climb the ladder alone, clung to the side of the ship, his tiny hands gripping the rail as Caleb struggled to pull him up. The water around them was now stained with blood, and the once peaceful bay transformed into a scene of horror. But the shark was relentless. Its primal instincts had taken over, and it circled once more, its enormous tail propelling it effortlessly through the water. The children, barely clinging to safety, watched in horror as the beast rose from the depths again. This time it targeted Caleb, who was still half submerged in the water. With a single, swift motion, the shark lunged forward, its jaws snapping shut around the boy's legs. Caleb screamed, his hands slipping from the rail as the shark yanked him beneath the surface. Sarah reached for him, her cries of anguish piercing the air, but it was too late. Caleb's body vanished into the blood-streaked water, his final scream muffled by the sea. Sarah, her mind fractured by fear, pulled Vom onto the boat, her body shaking uncontrollably. The two children huddled together, their eyes wide with terror as they waited for the next strike. The shark circled below, its dorsal fin slicing through the water as it prepared for the final kill. With terrifying speed, the shark breached once more. This time it struck the boat itself, its massive head slamming into the side with enough force to knock both children off balance. Sarah fell backward into the water, her hand slipping from Vom's grasp as the waves swallowed her. Vom, barely able to process what was happening, stood on the deck, his small body trembling. The shark turned toward Sarah, its eyes locked on her struggling form. In a single brutal motion, it closed the distance and struck, pulling her under in a cloud of red. Her body disappeared into the depths, leaving only silence behind. Vom, the last remaining member of the family, stood frozen in terror. He was too young to understand the horror that had unfolded around him entirely. But the fear was overwhelming. He clung to the boat's railing, his eyes wide and unblinking as he stared out at the bloodied water. The shark, having claimed its prey, swam off into the deep, leaving nothing but wreckage and silence in its wake. The boat, now adrift and broken, floated aimlessly in the bay, its once happy passengers lost forever to the unforgiving sea. By the time help arrived, the scene was one of devastation. The only trace of the family was the wreckage of the boat and the blood-streaked water where the sea had taken their bodies. The ocean had claimed them all, a brutal reminder of the power and danger that lurks beneath its surface. The Pacific Northwest waters stretched out in endless hues of blue and green as Quinn Shaw descended into the icy depths, his heartbeat echoing in his chest. The temperature was a stark contrast to the tepid air above, a reminder of the ocean's unfathomable cold. Quinn, a seasoned marine biologist, was on a solo dive near the rugged coastline of Washington, where the submerged terrain was a labyrinth of rocky outcrops and kelp forests. His mission was to study the elusive giant Pacific octopus, a creature known for its intelligence and elusive nature. The ocean floor, enshrouded in darkness, was a hauntingly beautiful landscape. Quinn's flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing a world of muted colors and strange, curved forms. He navigated through the kelp forest, and his every movement was measured and deliberate. His keen eyes scanned the rocky crevices and coral patches, seeking the cephalopod he hoped to observe. Then he saw it, a massive giant Pacific octopus nestled in a shallow crevice. Its hide was a tapestry of textures and colors, blending almost seamlessly with the surrounding rocks. The creature appeared docile, its eyes half closed in what seemed like a state of rest. Quinn's heart quickened at the sight. This was a rare encounter, and he carefully approached to avoid startling the octopus. His mind raced with excitement, but also with respect due to such a formidable predator. As Quinn drew nearer, the octopus's eyes snapped open and its entire body seemed to pulse with sudden alertness. The once peaceful creature shifted its giant, powerful tentacles, slowly unfurling. Quinn, though experienced, felt a twinge of unease. He had been trained to handle dangerous encounters, but the octopus's abrupt change in demeanor was unsettling. He moved closer, trying to keep his movements slow and non-threatening. The octopus's tentacles began to wave in the water, its dark, sensitive suckers extending as it sensed the approaching diver. The creature's large, intelligent eyes followed Ethan's every move, and he could almost feel the tension in the water. The cold sea seemed to grow colder as he neared the octopus, an instinctual warning that he might be infringing too closely. In a swift, terrifying motion, the octopus lashed out. Its tentacles extended with a speed and force that belied its previous calm. Before Quinn could react, the appendages coiled around his body with an iron grip. The powerful suckers adhered to his wetsuit, creating a suction that was impossible to break. Quinn's heart raced as the creature's tentacles tightened around him, pulling him toward the dark abyss. The initial shock of the attack left Quinn momentarily paralyzed, but adrenaline quickly surged through his veins. He struggled against the crushing embrace of the octopus, his limbs thrashing as he tried to free himself. The octopus's grip was relentless, its strength far surpassing anything Quinn had anticipated. Each tentacle wrapped around him with a force that threatened to crush his ribs, and the creature's movements were calculated, aiming to drag him deeper into the abyss. Quinn's mind raced as he fought to stay calm. He knew that panic would only exacerbate the situation. He tried to pry the tentacles off with his hands, but the octopus's grip was too firm. The pressure around his body intensified, and he could feel his oxygen supply dwindling as his breathing grew more rapid. The cold water seemed to close in around him, the weight of the ocean pressing down as he was dragged further away from the safety of his dive team. Desperation set in. Quinn's thoughts turned to his training and the techniques he had learned for such emergencies. He needed to free himself from the octopus's grip before it was too late. With every ounce of strength, he wrenched at the tentacles, using his body's momentum to try and break free. He focused on the areas where the tentacles were wrapped the tightest, trying to work them loose. The octopus, however, was not merely a brute force. It was a creature of intelligence and strategy. As Quinn strained to escape, the octopus shifted its hold, repositioning its tentacles to maintain its grip and prevent any escape attempts. The struggle seemed to stretch into eternity as Quinn fought against the creature's powerful limbs. In a moment of clarity, Quinn remembered a crucial fact about octopuses. They had a central brain and several smaller brains in each arm. By focusing on the most vulnerable points, he could disrupt the octopus's coordination. He concentrated on applying pressure to the base of the tentacles, hoping to trigger a reflex that might make the creature loosen its grip. The cold and the lack of oxygen were taking their toll, but Quinn's determination drove him forward. He continued to pry and push, every movement calculated and deliberate. The octopus's grip remained strong, but there were signs that it was starting to lose its tenacity. The creature's movements became slightly less coordinated as Quinn's efforts began to take effect. Finally, with one last desperate push, Quinn managed to loosen the tentacles enough to break free from the octopus's grip. Gasping for air, he propelled himself toward the surface, his body aching from the exertion and the cold. The struggle had left him exhausted, but the sight of the dim, sunlit surface of the water was a beacon of hope. As he ascended, he looked back and saw the octopus retreating into the darkness, its massive form disappearing into the depths. The encounter had been harrowing, but I had survived. He broke through the surface, gasping for the life-giving air, and saw his dive team's boat approaching. His colleagues pulled him aboard, their faces a mix of concern and relief. Quinn lay on the deck, shivering and exhausted, his mind replaying the terrifying moments of the encounter. The giant Pacific octopus was a creature of immense power and intelligence, and the experience had been a stark reminder of the ocean's unpredictable nature. He knew that, despite the danger, his respect for the marine world had only deepened. The sun blazed down on the Zambezi River, casting shimmering ripples across its surface. It was a sweltering summer day, the kind that made the river's calm waters seem irresistible. A group of friends, Bongi, Zanele, Thabo, Kofi, and Amina, had gathered on the riverbank, their laughter mingling with the sounds of nature. Ignoring the warnings from the locals about the dangers lurking beneath the surface, they plunged into the water, eager to escape the oppressive heat. Unbeknownst to the friends, a massive Nile crocodile lay in wait on the riverbank. Its green-brown hide blended perfectly with the murky waters and the surrounding vegetation. The predator's cold, calculating eyes tracked the group's every movement. The crocodile, a formidable creature exceeding 16 feet in length, had been patiently observing the humans, its hunger growing with each passing moment. The crocodile's patience was about to pay off. As Bongi swam further from the bank, laughing and splashing, the predator's muscles tensed. The crocodile had been waiting for the perfect opportunity, and now it had found it. With a sudden explosive surge, the crocodile lunged from the bank, its mighty jaws opening wide to capture its prey. The attack was swift and brutal. Bongi felt a sudden searing pain as the crocodile's jaws clamped around his leg, the crushing force causing him to go underwater with terrifying speed. The water erupted into chaos as the crocodile initiated its infamous death roll, a technique designed to tear apart its prey. The water muffled Bongi's screams as he was dragged beneath the surface. Panic struck the remaining friends as they realized what was happening. Zanele's joyous expression turned to one of horror as she spotted the turbulent waters where Bongi had been. Thabo, already disoriented from the shock of the attack, began flailing towards the shore, his movements erratic and fueled by raw fear. Kofi and Amina, their hearts racing, scrambled to make their way to the safety of the riverbank, their minds struggling to process the horrifying scene unfolding before them. The crocodile's ferocity was undeniable. It thrashed violently beneath the surface, its powerful tail sending waves crashing around. The water was a maelstrom of bubbles and churning mud as the crocodile completed its death roll, the once serene river now a scene of primal violence. Bongi's struggle was brief. The crocodile's superior strength and predatory instincts ensured a quick and merciless end. Zanele, Thabo, Kofi, and Amina reached the shore, their breath coming in ragged gasps as they collapsed on the riverbank. Their eyes darted back to the water, where the crocodile remained hidden beneath the murky depths. The once inviting river had become a place of terror, and the friends were left with the harrowing realization that one of their own was lost. In their panic, the group faced a critical decision. The river was still, but the presence of the crocodile was an ever-present threat. Thabo, his face pale with shock, glanced at his friends, his mind racing with the options available. Zanele, tears streaming down her face, struggled to comprehend the loss and the danger still lurking. Kofi, his body trembling, looked at Amina, who was clutching her arms tightly, her eyes wide with fear. As they deliberated, the crocodile's eyes appeared briefly above the surface, a chilling reminder of the danger that remained. The predator had not retreated. It was still nearby, its hunger and territorial instincts intact. The friends could not afford to stay in the river's proximity, but the thought of Bongi being lost while they escaped weighed heavily on their minds. The decision to flee was made with heavy hearts. They knew that the risk of attempting a rescue was too significant. The crocodile's presence made it clear that the river was no longer safe. They raced away from the water, their steps frantic as they left behind the scene of their friend's tragic end. A mixture of grief and relief marked their escape. The memory of Bongi's last moments etched into their minds. As they reached the relative safety of higher ground, they looked back at the river, its calm surface now a haunting reminder of the day's horrors. The once joyful outing had turned into a nightmare, and the friends were left grappling with the reality of their loss. and the lessons learned about the dangers of ignoring nature's warnings. The Caribbean sun blazed overhead, casting a shimmering dance of light across the crystal-clear waters. The scene was idyllic, with a gentle sway of the waves and the colorful marine life flitting just beneath the surface. Amelia Santos, a tourist from Portugal, had been eagerly anticipating this snorkeling adventure. The allure of the vibrant coral reefs and the promise of encountering exotic sea creatures had filled her with excitement. As she floated above the reef, her snorkeling gear provided a view of a world she had only seen in pictures. Amelia's partner for the day, Miguel Ferreira, swam nearby, both of them enveloped in a bubble of tranquil exploration. They glided past schools of tiny darting fish and the occasional graceful sea turtle. The water was warm, a pleasant contrast to the cooling breeze above. They drifted slowly, taking in the sights, unaware of the impending danger lurking beneath. The Portuguese man-o'-war, a creature renowned for its deadly sting, was a rare but not unheard-of visitor in these waters. Its translucent balloon-like float was often tricky to spot. Today, a drifting colony had made its way into the area where Amelia and Miguel were snorkeling. The colony's tentacles, nearly invisible against the sunlit water, flowed with the current, undulating in the soft waves. Amelia, engrossed in observing a particularly vibrant coral formation, unwittingly swam into the drifting colony. The first sign of trouble was a slight, almost imperceptible brush against her arm. At first, she felt a curious tickle, but it quickly intensified into a searing, burning pain. The sensation spread rapidly, consuming her arm and creeping along her shoulder. The potent and aggressive venom began to course through her veins. Within moments, Amelia's muscles seized. The once effortless movement became a struggle as her body reacted violently to the toxin. Her breath came in sharp, ragged bursts, each inhalation more complicated than the last. The burning pain escalated, making it almost impossible for her to focus on anything other than the relentless agony. Her vision blurred and her limbs, once strong and agile, grew weak and unresponsive. Panic set in as she began to drift aimlessly, her movements becoming increasingly erratic. Miguel, glancing back to check on Amelia, noticed her sudden, distressing change in behavior. Her usually fluid movements had become jerky and disjointed. Realizing something was wrong, he quickly made his way toward her, the seriousness of the situation dawning on him. The colony of man-o'-war was still drifting nearby, and the proximity of its tentacles was a constant threat. Miguel reached Amelia as she was struggling to stay afloat, her breathing labored and her body going limp. He could see the telltale red welts on her skin where the tentacles had brushed against her, an alarming indicator of the severity of her condition. With urgency, Miguel maneuvered his own body to support Amelia, placing himself between her and the drifting tentacles. His movements were deliberate and swift, trying to minimize further contact with the venomous creatures. Miguel worked to stabilize Amelia, his hands gripping her securely as he swam toward the safety of the boat they had left behind. Amelia's condition deteriorated rapidly. Her breathing became shallow and irregular, her face pale beneath her snorkel mask. Miguel's heart raced as he struggled to maintain both his composure and Amelia's precarious position in the water. He had to act quickly. Every second counted. Miguel's training in first aid was now being put to the ultimate test. As he reached the boat, Miguel lifted Amelia's limp body from the water, carefully avoiding any additional contact with the tentacles that might still be drifting nearby. He hoisted her onto the boat's deck, her body almost lifeless. The ship, a small personal craft, was their only refuge from the marine menace, and Miguel knew that the most critical part of their ordeal was beginning. He immediately started administering first aid, his hands moving with practiced precision despite his rising anxiety. He had learned that the first step in treating a Portuguese man-o'-war sting was to rinse the affected area with vinegar to neutralize the venom, not fresh water, which could trigger more venom release. Miguel grabbed the bottle of vinegar from the boat's first aid kit, pouring it gently over Amelia's stung arm and shoulder. Her skin sizzled slightly as the vinegar made contact. Miguel checked her vital signs, his movements methodical as he assessed her breathing and heart rate. Her condition was dire. He needed to ensure that she could breathe adequately and that her airway remained clear. He positioned her on her side, a maneuver to help prevent choking if she vomited or had trouble breathing. Finally, Miguel was able to stabilize Amelia enough to call for emergency assistance. The radio crackled to life and he relayed their location, the boat's coordinates sent out with desperate urgency. He continued to monitor Amelia. Her breathing was still labored, but her condition slightly improved thanks to his swift actions. As the sound of approaching rescue boats filled the air, Miguel's exhaustion was palpable, but relief washed over him. The ordeal had been a harrowing reminder of the raw power of nature and the swift turn a seemingly perfect day could take. When the rescue team arrived and took over, Miguel watched as Amelia was carefully transferred to safety. Her life was hanging in the balance, but her chances of survival vastly improved by the timely intervention. The serene Caribbean waters, once a backdrop to their adventure, now held a sobering lesson in the unpredictable and often dangerous beauty of the natural world. In the heart of Antarctica, where the icy expanse stretches endlessly under a pale blue sky, Liselotte Madsen meticulously recorded her observations of the emperor penguins. She had dedicated months to studying these remarkable birds, nestled along the icy shores of the frozen continent. The team's research camp was a modest but well-equipped setup, situated near a glacial ice shelf, providing a commanding view of the penguins' natural habitat. Liselotte, a seasoned researcher with a keen sense of the harsh environment, moved cautiously across the treacherous ice. She was clad in insulated gear designed to withstand the bone-chilling cold, her breath misting with each exhale. Her colleagues, Henrik and Freya, worked diligently nearby, analyzing data and monitoring the penguin colonies. The wind howled with an eerie, persistent whine, carrying with it the distant haunting calls of the penguins. The ice shelf, which jutted into the vast, frigid waters, was their observation point. Liselotte stood at its edge, noting the penguins' behavior with the precision of a scientist who had studied them for years. The ocean below was deceptively calm, its icy surface gleaming in the stark sunlight. But Liselotte knew that beneath this seemingly tranquil facade lay dangers that could strike without warning. As she focused on her observations, a sudden, unexpected movement in the water caught her eye. The surface rippled, distorting briefly before returning to its stillness. Liselotte's instinct warned her that something was amiss. Her gaze remained fixed on the water, the frigid wind whipping her cheeks as she tried to make sense of the disturbance. Without any warning, a powerful force surged from the water. A leopard seal, an apex predator known for its remarkable speed and aggressive behavior, burst forth with alarming speed. Its jaws, formidable and lined with sharp teeth, clamped onto Liselotte's leg with a bone-crushing grip. The sheer force of the bite drove her to the ice shelf, her body propelled backward as the pain radiated through her. The shock of the attack was immediate and overwhelming. Liselotte's instincts screamed at her to pull away, but the seal's vice-like jaws held her fast. The freezing water swirled around them as the leopard seal dragged her violently toward the edge of the ice. The frigid touch of the sea seeped through her protective gear, numbing her skin as she was pulled from the safety of the shelf. Henrik and Freya, having witnessed the sudden assault, reacted with frantic urgency. They raced toward the edge of the ice, their breaths visible in the cold air as they scrambled to reach Liselotte. Their hearts pounded with terror as they watched the seal drag her further away from the ice shelf, the predator's strength and determination evident in every powerful stroke. The cold water was relentless. Liselotte's limbs grew increasingly unresponsive as the icy grasp of the sea enveloped her. The leopard seal's jaws remained firmly locked on her leg, the pain radiating through her body as it pulled her into deeper waters. The icy waves surged around her, each movement of the seal sending ripples through the water and intensifying the chilling effect on her body. As the team reached the edge of the ice shelf, their attempts to help were hampered by the treacherous conditions. The ice was slippery and unstable, making it challenging to maintain their footing. Henrik extended a sturdy rope toward Liselotte, hoping to provide a lifeline. Still, the distance and the seal's aggressive maneuvers made it nearly impossible to get close enough to be effective. Freya, meanwhile, worked to anchor another rope securely, her hands trembling as she prepared to venture onto the ice. She knew the urgency of the situation but also understood the risks involved. The leopard seal was relentless, its dark eyes focused with a predatory intensity as it continued its assault, dragging Lieselot farther from the ice shelf with each powerful stroke. Lieselot's struggle to stay above the surface grew more desperate. The freezing water sapped her strength and clouded her thoughts, making it increasingly difficult to think clearly. Her body was becoming numb from the cold, and every attempt to move or free herself from the seal's grip felt like a monumental effort. She could feel her consciousness waning, her breaths coming in ragged gasps as she fought to keep her head above the water. Realizing the severity of the situation, Henrik and Freya worked together to fashion a makeshift rescue device. They carefully maneuvered the ropes, attempting to bridge the gap between themselves and Lieselot. Henrik's voice, though inaudible over the howling wind and the crashing waves, conveyed a sense of determination as he coordinated their efforts. Freya, battling her fear, focused on securing the ropes, her heart pounding with anxiety. With a coordinated effort, Henrik and Freya managed to get the rope close enough to Lieselot. Despite the leopard seal's aggressive attempts to drag her further away, Lieselot reached out, her hand barely able to grip the rope. The seal, sensing the change in the situation, intensified its struggle, its powerful body thrashing violently in the water. The struggle between Lieselot and the leopard seal reached a critical point. The seal's powerful tail and jaws continued to exert tremendous force, but the team's determination and the effectiveness of the rope began to turn the tide. Henrik and Freya pulled with all their strength, working in tandem to draw Lieselot closer to the ice shelf. The ice shelf seemed to loom ever closer, but the leopard seal was relentless. It continued to attack with an almost frantic determination, its movements driven by instinct and aggression. Lieselot's strength was nearly depleted, her body growing weaker as the freezing water and the relentless assault took their toll. With one final desperate effort, Henrik and Freya managed to pull Lieselot onto the ice shelf. The leopard seal, thwarted in its attempt to drag its prey under the ice, retreated into the depths, its dark form disappearing beneath the surface. The team, though exhausted and shaken, quickly attended to Lieselot, checking her injuries and helping her to safety. The icy landscape around them was silent once more, the danger having passed, but the reality of the ordeal etched deeply into their minds. Lieselot, though battered and exhausted, had survived the harrowing encounter. As the team huddled together, their breaths visible in the cold air, they knew they had faced a formidable predator and emerged victorious. In the aftermath of the attack, the team's focus shifted to ensuring Lieselot's recovery and analyzing the encounter. The sun cast a warm glow over the pristine waters off New Zealand's coast. The turquoise surface shimmered in the early afternoon light, stretching out toward the horizon in a seemingly endless expanse. Kahutahi and Tui Rangiwea, two friends with a shared love for the ocean, glided through the serene water in their kayaks. The gentle splash of their paddles created ripples that disturbed the otherwise glassy surface, blending seamlessly into the tranquil surroundings. Kahu, with his sun-bleached hair and a sturdy frame, maneuvered his kayak with practiced ease. His eyes were focused on the distant cliffs, but he often glanced at the rhythmic rise and fall of Tui's kayak beside him. Tui, lean and agile, was equally at ease, enjoying the calmness of the sea as she paddled in sync with Kahu. Their conversation was sporadic, filled with shared looks and the occasional nod, as they reveled in the solitude and natural beauty that surrounded them. For hours they had drifted through these untouched waters, marveling at the play of light on the water and the occasional darting shadow of a fish beneath the surface. The coastline, rugged and unspoiled, seemed a world away from the hustle of their everyday lives. It was a perfect day for kayaking, the kind that made them both feel connected to the raw, untamed essence of nature. But the serenity was abruptly interrupted. Kahu noticed a sudden movement in the water, a dark shape cutting through the otherwise smooth surface. He squinted against the sun's glare and saw the unmistakable outline of a giant shark circling their kayaks. It was a mako shark, its sleek, powerful form gliding effortlessly through the water. The predator's dorsal fins sliced through the surface, its sharp profile evident even from a distance. Kahu's pulse quickened as he exchanged a worried glance with Tui. The shark's presence was alarming, but its initial movement seemed more curious than aggressive. The Mako circled their kayaks with a casual menace, its eyes unblinking, scanning them with a predator's focus. The kayakers kept their distance, trying to stay calm and maneuver their kayaks away from the circling shark. The Mako's curiosity, however, soon turned to something more sinister. Without warning, the shark lunged, ramming Kahu's kayak with an explosive force. The impact jolted the vessel violently, sending Kahu tumbling into the water. He surfaced, gasping, his heart racing as he looked up to see the shark's dark form lingering nearby. The kayak, now partially overturned, bobbed precariously. Tui's eyes widened with fear as she saw Kahu struggling in the water. She paddled furiously toward him, her movements frantic and uncoordinated, her mind racing through the scenarios of how to help him. The Mako, sensing the shift in the situation, circled closer, its movements growing more erratic and aggressive. Kahu fought to stay afloat, his head bobbing above the water as he tried to grab onto the overturned kayak. The shark was now closing in on him with alarming speed, its predatory instincts fully engaged. Its dark shadow loomed beneath the water, creating a chilling contrast with the bright sun overhead. Tui reached Kahu and extended her paddle, trying to pull him back onto the kayak. Her hands trembled, and her breath came in shallow bursts as she strained to keep both herself and Kahu safe. The Mako shark, however, was relentless. It struck the kayak again, this time with a force that nearly capsized Tui's vessel. The situation escalated rapidly. The shark's aggression was unmistakable, and its repeated ramming of the kayak sent both Tui and Kahu into a state of frantic desperation. Tui attempted to push the shark away with her paddle, but the creature's powerful jaws snapped just inches from her. The water around them churned violently as the shark continued its assault. Kahu, still clinging to the kayak, managed to pull himself onto it, though it was unstable and barely afloat. Tui struggled to maintain her balance as she paddled around them, her eyes scanning the water for any sign of the shark. The Mako's dark form was now moving with a predatory rhythm, its powerful tail slicing through the water with precision. Tui's efforts to fend off the shark were met with mixed results. The Mako was fast and aggressive, its speed making it difficult to predict its next move. Each time Tui attempted to push it away, the shark retaliated with increased ferocity, its jaws snapping dangerously close to the kayaks. Kahu and Tui knew that they had to act quickly. They had to work together to outmaneuver the shark and make their way back to shore. Tui directed Kahu to paddle towards the nearby coastline while she kept the shark at bay with her paddle. The Mako, seemingly unwilling to give up its pursuit, followed closely, its presence an ever-looming threat. Every stroke of their paddles was a battle against the relentless force of the shark. The water was choppy and tumultuous, a contrast to the calm that had preceded the attack. The shark's persistence was unnerving, its powerful body cutting through the waves with unrelenting determination. The shark's repeated strikes battered Kahu and Tui's kayaks, the vessels taking on water and becoming increasingly unstable. The two friends worked in tandem, their movements synchronized, despite the panic and fear that gripped them. They knew that their only chance of survival lay in reaching the safety of the shore. As the coastline drew nearer, the shark's attacks grew more desperate. It seemed to sense that its prey was escaping, and its movements became more erratic and aggressive. The water around them surged with each impact, the shark's powerful tail sending waves crashing against the kayaks. Finally, as they approached the rocky shore, the shark hesitated, its dark form retreating slightly. It circled once more, its aggressive demeanor tempered by the realization that its quarry was nearing safety. Kahu and Tui, exhausted and drenched, scrambled onto the rocky beach, their bodies trembling with cold and fear. The Mako shark, thwarted in its relentless pursuit, eventually disappeared into the depths of the ocean. The danger had passed, but the impact of the encounter would linger in their minds long after the day was over. As they looked out at the vast expanse of the sea, the once serene waters now seemed a reminder of nature's raw and unpredictable power.